Every secret teaching you've ever chased was hidden from you on purpose. And the people who hid it loved you enough to do it. You've probably felt the pull toward deeper knowledge, the frustration of sensing there's more beneath the surface. By the end of this, you'll understand why the gatekeeping was mercy, and why your own readiness determines what any teaching can actually do inside you. The ancient mystery schools of Egypt, Greece, and India all shared one strange agreement. They refused to teach their most advanced material to beginners. The schools at Heliopolis required years of preparation. The Pythagorean school demanded 5 years of silence before a student could even sit in the same room as the inner circle. 5 years of saying nothing. The Egyptian temples at Karnak had layered chambers, outer courts for the public, inner sanctuaries reserved for initiates who had spent a decade proving their mental stability. This seems extreme until you understand what they were protecting. The advanced teachings dealt with the creative power of consciousness, the ability to shape reality through sustained mental states, to work with universal forces that respond to the quality of your inner world. These schools understood something that modern spiritual culture has mostly forgotten. A powerful tool in untrained hands causes damage proportional to the tool's power. A sharper blade cuts deeper in every direction, including back toward the one holding it. Think about your own experience for a moment. You've encountered a spiritual concept, felt the rush of understanding, and then tried to apply it from a place of fear or desperation. The teaching was sound. Your inner state contaminated the application. You used the law of assumption to obsess over what you lacked, rather than to dwell in fulfillment. You tried to visualize from anxiety instead of from the end. The technique became a magnifying glass for the very patterns it was designed to dissolve. The mystery schools saw this happen constantly, and their solution was elegant. Train the vessel before pouring in the wine. The first years of training in nearly every tradition focused entirely on what the Greeks called enkratia, self-mastery. The student learned to observe their own thoughts without being swept into them. They practiced holding a single mental image steady for extended periods. They fasted, maintained silence, and followed strict routines designed to reveal how little control they actually had over their own minds. The Pythagoreans were told to review their entire day each evening, thought by thought, examining where attention wandered, where emotion hijacked reason, where assumptions operated unchecked. This training seems unrelated to metaphysical knowledge. It was the entire foundation. Consider what happens when someone encounters the teaching that consciousness creates reality, that your assumptions harden into fact, that the world you experience is a mirror of your dominant mental state. Without mental discipline, this teaching becomes a source of paranoia. Every negative thought feels like a curse you've cast on yourself. Every fear becomes evidence of an incoming manifestation. The student spirals into hypervigilance about their own mind, which produces exactly the anxious, contracted state that the teaching was meant to liberate them from. The trained mind responds differently. A student who has spent years watching thoughts arise and dissolve without attachment hears the same teaching and recognizes it as confirmation of what they've already experienced in practice. They've already felt the difference between dwelling in a state and being dragged through one. They've already tasted the stillness beneath mental noise. The teaching lands in prepared soil and takes root cleanly. Neville Goddard spoke about this distinction constantly. Though he rarely framed it in terms of mystery schools, he described feeling the reality of the wish fulfilled as simple, and it is, structurally. Hold a mental state, persist in it, let the outer world conform. 3 steps a child could understand. But the execution requires a quality of inner stillness that most people have never cultivated. The feeling of the wish fulfilled demands that you override every sensory report contradicting it, every logical objection, every emotional reaction to current circumstances. That override capacity is exactly what the mystery schools spent years developing before they ever mentioned manifestation. You felt the gap between understanding a principle and living it. That gap has a specific texture. The frustration of knowing what to do while watching yourself do the opposite. Your thoughts scatter the moment you try to hold them steady. Your emotional state swings in response to external events you are supposed to be independent of. You read the teaching again, convinced you missed something. You didn't miss anything. You skipped the training that makes the teaching operational. The Hermetic tradition encoded this in the structure of its own texts. The Kybalion presents 7 principles, but the early chapters emphasize mental transmutation, the art of changing one's mental state at will, as the master skill upon which everything else depends. The principle of mentalism, that the universe is mental in nature, sounds like philosophy until you can actually govern your own mind. Then, it becomes a working technology. The order of presentation was deliberate. Learn to control the instrument before you play the symphony. There's a parallel in how martial arts traditions handle dangerous techniques. A student who learns a lethal strike in their first week has gained the ability to cause harm without the judgment to know when force is warranted, the control to calibrate their response, or the emotional stability to stay calm under pressure. The technique becomes more dangerous to the practitioner than to any opponent. Years of foundational training build the container that makes advanced techniques safe and effective. The mystery schools operated on the same logic with consciousness itself. So what does this mean for you right now in practical terms? It means the frustration you feel when spiritual teachings seem to work inconsistently has a specific cause. Your inner environment fluctuates too much. You hold the state of the wish fulfilled for 20 minutes during meditation, then spend the remaining 23 hours and 40 minutes reacting to appearances. The teaching requires sustained assumption, living from the end as a continuous mental posture. That continuity is a trained skill. The ancient schools gave their students years to develop it because they understood how long genuine mental discipline takes to establish. The good news is that you can begin this training immediately without a temple or a guru or 5 years of enforced silence. Start with observation. Spend one full day simply noticing where your attention goes without trying to redirect it. You'll discover patterns you've never consciously seen. Habitual loops of worry, mental rehearsals of conversations that haven't happened, repetitive emotional responses triggered by the same categories of stimuli. This inventory is the first step the ancient initiates took. They called it different things in different traditions, but the practice was universal. Know the terrain of your own mind before attempting to reshape it. The next layer involves what Neville called mental diet. For a set period, you refuse to entertain any thought that contradicts the state you've chosen. Every time a contradictory thought arises, you don't fight it. You don't panic about having it, you simply revise it. Replace it with the assumption you've decided to maintain, and continue. This sounds manageable for an afternoon. Try it for a week. The difficulty reveals exactly why the mystery schools required years of preparation. The mind's momentum is staggering. Reversing that momentum is like turning an ocean liner. The wheel moves immediately, but the ship takes miles to respond. Here's where most seekers abandon the work. The delay between inner change and outer evidence creates doubt. Doubt dissolves the very state that was beginning to take hold. The ancient students were protected from this trap by their environment. The school itself maintained the atmosphere of assumption. Other initiates held the same understanding. The teachers embodied the reality of the principles. The students' faith wasn't tested in isolation, because the entire context supported sustained belief. You have to build that context for yourself. Choose what you consume. Choose whose voices fill your ears. Choose which version of reality you reinforce through conversation and attention. Your environment is your temple now. Curate it as deliberately as the Egyptian priests curated the inner chambers at Luxor. A skeptic within the tradition might ask, if these teachings are true and useful, why gate them at all? Why allow anyone to suffer in ignorance when the knowledge exists? The answer lives in your own experience. You've received teachings you later realized you applied destructively because you lacked the foundation. Premature knowledge didn't accelerate your growth. It complicated your confusion with spiritual vocabulary. You worried about vibration while your actual emotional life remained unchanged. The gate existed because the path through it, the years of discipline, was the teaching. The advanced material merely confirmed what the training had already built into the student's nervous system. The mystery schools weren't hoarding power. They were sequencing transformation correctly. Foundation first, structure second. Capstone last. Skip the foundation and the entire building collapses under the weight of its own roof. Your work today is the same work those ancient students did in their first year. Watch your mind. Notice its habits. Practice holding one chosen state for longer than feels comfortable. When you slip, return without drama. The drama of self-criticism is just another untrained mental pattern consuming the energy you need for actual change. Every master who ever walked through those temple doors started exactly where you are, staring at the chaos of their own undisciplined thoughts and wondering if stillness was even possible. They discovered that stillness lives underneath the noise, waiting, and the only tool required to reach it is the willingness to sit with discomfort long enough for the mind to realize you're serious. The advanced teachings are already in your hands. Every book is available, every lecture archived, every principle documented. The gate that remains is the one the ancient schools always pointed toward, your own capacity to hold a state steady long enough for reality to bend around it. That capacity is built one disciplined hour at a time, in the privacy of your own mind, where no one can do the work for you. The temple was never the building. It was always the mind that learned to be still inside it.